Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sarah Martin with The Contour Chemist. All right guys, today is a day we're gonna be talking all about brushes. Both 3D brushes and even the ones from Demi Colour. I'm gonna do a little comparing and contrasting. I'm gonna show you two different sides of my face. So we're gonna do more full coverage versus natural. And I'm gonna tell you my favorite ways to use each brush in honor of the current ongoing promotion, the Brush Blitz, that is still going on right now over at Seint. So if you want to learn more about Seint's brushes, keep watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for being here. All right, friends, so let's get started. I want to show you guys all of the brushes from Seint. Now, I've never shown all of them in one video. I do have quite a few videos on just 3D brushes, from how to use each brush to how to use each brush, like one brush for a full face. And I go through every single face brush, showing how I would recommend using it for a full face. But this video, we're going to be talking about all the brushes, and I'm gonna tell you how they compare and contrast, what I would recommend using each brush for. And if you don't know, there is a promotion going on with some curated collections that are discounted, that are all on 3D brushes over at Seint Official, going through the 25th, if you want to check out that promotion. But always asked about comparing them with Demi brushes. And I've never done a comparison because, I'll be honest, I don't know how much longer these brushes are going to be available. They are currently discounted, but they have been for a very long time. Now, I will just be honest with you guys, because I'm always honest. I don't know if that's because they're going away, discounted because it's being discontinued. So if you don't know, with Demi Colour, there are some colors that they have decided are limited edition. They're not going to be making them anymore, and they're concentrating Demi on just like filtering. Okay, so it's no longer like a full face product that you will be using, sculpt, blush, all of those things. It's just for filtering certain areas of our face, and then you can use it with 3D as long as you aren't layering. I do have videos showing how to do the hybrid method, and I'm going to kind of show you that on one side for my more natural look. But I'm always asked, because these are discounted, how they compare with 3D brushes. And I just didn't know how long they'd be around, but they're still available. So there are some that are very similar. And so I'm gonna kind of explain the differences and really show you when I get to each 3D brush, since some of these are discounted, and these can totally be used. They're designed for creams. They're totally can be used for 3D as well. I'll talk about each one of those. Now, when it comes to Seint's eye brushes, I feel like it's a little bit more straightforward. So I went ahead and did my eyes so that this video would not be 2 hours long. So we're gonna run through these really fast, so that way we can really concentrate on these. I'll be honest, there's only two that I would say can only be used for the eyes, in my opinion. And even that, I've used some of these for my face before anyway. So let's go through the eyeshadow brushes, the ones that are designed for eyeshadow at least, really fast. I'd say the eyeshadow brush, pretty simple, right? It's just a typical blending brush. So it's got one large blending side and then one small, more pencil style. They call it a pencil brush style, meaning it's just smaller. So there are so many different ways you can use these brushes, but I would say every day I only use this brush. There's not one other brush that I would use for my crease. So when I am starting with my crease shade or going up over my hood, this is by far the best brush for that. In fact, I don't brushes even like this, I love these, but these are so much more dense. They're not meant for blending. This is actually a blending brush. So if you want to apply the color and put it where you want it with this, and then go in and blend it with this, but to me, that's just an extra step when this applies and blends at the same time. And this is by far my favorite blending brush I've ever used, and I have a lot. So This is the perfect size for underneath your eyes. I use this to halo every day. I would say I also use this end for my inner corner under brow every day. And I also use the side of this brush to press on, which is what I did in today's eye look, to press on shimmer. Okay. I would say this brush is not the best for packing on a whole lot of pigment or a whole lot of shimmer. There are better options for that. This is best for like a light wash. So where I like to use Tawanda over other colors to give it that shimmer, this is always the brush I pick up because it's like loosely packed. It's meant for blending and it's meant for more of a wash all over the lid. So if you want to just use one color all over lash line to brow, I would pick up this color. It's not going to deposit too much color in any one spot because it's best with this motion, this kind of light flicking. It blends like a dream. So this smaller end, I also see a lot of people use to pack on that outer corner color. I would say it's not my favorite for that, but it can do it. So I'd say if you're looking to start with Seint eyeshadows and you don't have any of the brushes, this is the one brush I recommend for every beginner because technically you can do an entire eye look with this brush and except lining the eyes. But actually today I use this small end to just run a darker color along my lash line. So if you want a smudgy look, a more natural lived in eyeshadow as a liner look, this is the side that I use for that. So you can get an entire eye look with the eyeshadow brush. It's by far my favorite, and I would say I did my entire eye look with just this brush today. It's the one eyeshadow brush that I think you can do it all with, and I can't say that about the others. Okay, the next brush I would say is the line brush. Now this is a more detailed brush. This is the only brush I ever use for my brows. Okay, so it's got this small slanted tip. It's more, if you've been around for a long time where we are still mascara and you used to have this brush, this is the Know Your Angles brush. It was larger, it was wider, it was not quite as dense, and it didn't really make hairline strokes up a whole lot of product, a whole lot more product, I'd say. So if you have this brush, but you wanted to make more hairline strokes, say in your brows, that kind of thing, I would say the line brush is where it's at. Now, this is also the brush I use to line my eyes if I want more of a precise line or if I'm using the Black Friday eyeliner, but I've also used this brush to even line my lips. So angled brushes are really versatile. The fact that it's got a spoolie on one end, so you can either comb through your lashes or extensions or whatever, but I use it to always blend out because I use an eyeshadow in my brows every day and it blends my brows. So I'd say this more or less is just an eye brush, even though you could use that end for your lips as well. Okay, so the next brush is the Smudge brush. So again, originally designed for eyeshadow. I will say I have one of the older ones and I keep this one for my face and this one for my eyes. And it's because, and I'll show you how to use it, but this is my favorite brush when I actually want a precise nose contour. This brush is awesome. But for the eyes, I will say that this is what replaced this end for me when it was released later. This was our original brush. When this was released, I realized what a game changer it is for the outer corner. So anytime I'm doing an outer corner, I'm going to use this more domed end of the Smudge brush every single time. Now, the other end is a little bit more flat. Now, both of these are extremely dense, which is why they're not the best blending brushes, but they blend out really well if you just simply tap. So when I do my outer corner, I tap it on and I tap to blend and it blends out like a dream. Then if I still need help blending, I usually will flip it over and use this end to blend, or I use this more flat end when I want more pigmentation with my shadow and I want to press it on the lid. I'd say ends are both a little bit too wide for me and my small eyes to do under, but this more flat end could work for some eye sizes depending on your eyes, of course. But I will show you how to nose contour when we get to that part. But this is a smudge brush, and when I'm doing a more dramatic eye, I will always, always, always pick up this brush. So if you only have this one, you're wanting to take your eyeshadow up a level, I would say pick up the smudge. Now, the next brush I would say is, the name says it all. It is an eyeshadow, a lip, and a face brush. I always have 2 to 3. I think I have another one over there. One is stained with lip color. So one is for lips, one is for eyes, and one is for face. So the multitasker. It really does everything, okay? I can't believe how many people like don't have this brush, because I feel like after the main face brushes to apply highlight and contour, this is one of the first brushes I recommend because you can do anything with it. So on the daily, I use the eyeshadow brush, and anytime I'm wanting a lot of color payoff or a lot of shimmer or to really pack on eyeshadow, I will use this end. It's the only end that has the dense bristles, and this is literally designed for packing on. So you never want to kind of swipe this brush. I mean, it probably is just going to lead to streaking and fallout, but when you pack on color, you just press it on and you can get the most color payoff or shimmer, whatever your desire. I also like to use this large end for smudging out my eyeliner or actually applying shadow as liner on the upper or lower lash line. I use the small end for the same. If I'm using Black Friday eyeliner, sometimes this end is a lot easier for clients than even the line brush, because this one you almost can just kind of paint it on, whereas the line brush can easily kind of streak if you're just pulling, but you have to almost like stamp it, okay? So this small end I'll use for Black Friday eyeliner. I like to sometimes brighten with my inner corner and under the brow because it's so precise. I can really put the shimmer exactly where I want it. You guys always see me, I'm always lining my lips with this brush or applying lip color. So I line with both sides, the small end or the large end, and then I apply my lip color when I want the most pigmentation, most color payoff, most bold lips. If you're gonna do a more bold red or hot pink lip, I'm gonna use the brush for more precise application. Now for face, this is the one brush I will pick up for blemishes. Now I've also seen people use this small end of the eyeshadow brush for lining their lips and for blemishes. I would say it can press on color well. This pencil end is pretty dense, but it's not as precise as this. And when it comes to blemishes, you want to kind of keep the color right where this spot is. And so this small end is what I'm going to use for blemishes. Sometimes I then flip it over and then use the large end for setting powder to then set that in place. So anytime you have anything precise, it's the multitasker. It can do everything. It can also nose contour. So this one I will say requires a little bit more of a steady hand. But you can use the larger end to kind of draw on your stripes. And then the small end is actually perfect size because when you're doing that center highlight, you want it as small as possible. This is very small. Problem with me, and I have pretty steady hands, but I cannot get this straight for the life of me. So I'll show you how I use the other brush. It's a little bit more forgiving, but it works really well. Some people even use this for their brows. So before we had the line brush, a lot of people used this to fill in their brows as well. So again, there's nothing this can't do except for you really don't want to highlight and contour with it because it would just take forever, but I'm sure it could do it. But blemishes, it's awesome for. And when I get to Demi, I will show you a lot of people actually started with Demi using this brush. Okay, so I'll show you how that compares when we get to that part. And then also there's a brush that is similar to the eyeshadow brush that is part of the Demi line, and I will show you that one as well. All right, guys, I've talked long enough about eyes. So Eyes are pretty easy peasy. Start with the eyeshadow brush, line brush. Multitasker can do everything. It's just kind of a personal preference whether you want to be able to do your eyes with one brush or if you're like me and you want all the brushes because you like having the option to have more control and more detail, more precision. Okay, let's do face, shall we? All right, I want to show you as we go through each brush what I would say it is best for and why it's maybe not so good for some circumstances. And so I thought the easiest way to show you would be kind of just doing, I'm gonna do my makeup like I'd always do. We're just going to maybe do one side more full coverage and one side more natural. Okay, we're gonna see what we like. I'm gonna show you how to use each brush as we go through the application process. All right, I kind of split up my brushes into my light and then more medium to full coverage, and I'll try to kind of explain my favorites for beginners and why or why not some are the best options. But first things first, it doesn't matter what kind of brush you are even starting with, whether it is one of our brushes that are really designed for creams, or if you're even using maybe something you already have or you're trying with your fingers. The most important thing about using 3D foundation per se is understanding the product and the cream and understanding amounts, I would say, is numero uno. I see a lot of videos going around of deceiving videos, I would say, of people using brushes or using their fingers and using the product in ways that I'm like, I'll be honest, that I don't know how they can even wear it on their face without feeling so heavy and tacky or having it come off, and it's very deceiving. Okay, so I just want to be very upfront with you guys that this product is extremely pigmented, and if you're having to use a lot of product to get coverage, you are absolutely color matched wrong, without a doubt in my mind. Okay, you should be able to use so very little product that you don't need to purchase very often. I mean, I have unlimited supply of makeup, right? Just in case. And I still have been using this cream for 6 months, okay? A little goes a long way if you're applying it in a certain way. And if you're having to over apply product and you don't like the way it feels on your face, you either have a brush that is picking up too much to begin with, or you're maybe trying to use your hands and not being able to control the amount you're picking up, or you've been color matched too light. Like if I had to use this everywhere, I would have to use far more product, but because I'm using a corrector that matches the darkest points in my face first, I have to use far less of these two combined than I would have to of just one lighter shade. Does that make sense? So for me, color is everything. How you pick it up on the brush is everything. And really understanding that a little goes such a long way. Okay, so I'll be honest, I have over 5 years of experience with these creams, and I still do everything a certain way in order for me to not over apply. Okay, it's the number one thing that happens when people switch to this makeup is they just use way too much than they need to. And that's okay, but you should be able to really adjust it right from the beginning. If you're feeling sticky or tacky, it takes a little bit of trial and error to learn exactly how much to apply. But if you've been wearing the makeup for 6 months and are going through 10s a month at a time, you just have the wrong colors, okay? So when I just tap in, I'm never swiping, never. Like this is just for me tapping in the center every time. Don't ever swipe into the creams, even if the brush feels like it needs to be swiped, okay? I feel like this brush is the most notorious that people just tend to do this, okay? And I promise you, if you swipe in with this is the 3D brush, first of all, these bristles will literally pick up enough for your entire face with one swipe. In my opinion, these are really dense. You're gonna lose some product inside of it. And you'll see why this is not the brush I recommend for beginners, because beginners tend to do that. So I'm gonna try to show you with every brush how I'm picking up the product, because I feel like sometimes that's off screen. You can't see it clearly. And again, it can be deceiving because people feel like you're applying way more than you actually are. And when I pick up product, I get probably less than this on my brush every single time, okay? When I tap in with my fingers, I pick up way more. And so if I was to do the dot method all over my face, it is much harder for me to control the amount of product. And if you get too much, you're simply gonna be blending it around on your face, and you're gonna have to try to pick up more product with the perfector to remove excess. So my number one thing is just use a light hand, okay? And that's easier said than done. I totally get it. So I'm gonna show you the difference between light to full coverage and how much product, and it's all, in my opinion, it's all in the brush choice, okay? You're still using very little product. You might be applying a little bit more of certain shades to get full coverage, but you're still gonna be using very little, okay? So this is my darkest shade. This is designed to match the darkest points of my face so I don't have texture, so I don't have longevity issues, and so that I'm getting the best possible coverage from my creams and allowing me to use less, okay? So this is too dark for me to use fully all over my face, so I'm gonna show you how I use this in combination with my main shade, okay? So all I'm gonna do, and I already dug my finger there so it's nice and soft, is I'm barely kind of tapping, okay? So when I get the product on, do you see how very little that is? Okay, so when I'm actually applying it, I'm gonna try to do half my chin here. Do you see it going on my face too dark? Do you even see it going on? Okay, so I'm just going to use this buffing motion so that I'm getting the least amount of product to color correct that redness. Can you see that? And then anywhere I have texture, I tend to have a little bit of texture right here, I'm using that darker shade, okay? Even if I'm not darker there, because with our highlights, it just is how it works. A shade lighter is going to always increase the look of texture. You always go darker if in doubt, okay? So I'm gonna hit the darkest points on my face to color correct. Okay, I'm gonna hit this rosacea and I'm going to buff it in. Now this is gonna be my light side, so I'm using as little product as I possibly can and really controlling exactly where it's placed. So that I can still see my skin through it when I'm done. Okay, now buffing motion is key for a light hand. Anytime you use a buffing motion, you're gonna really work that cream in and get it blended out far better. Okay, so my entire nose is the darkest point of my face. So when it comes to my nose, I always like to hit the broken capillaries first. Tap in again. I'm gonna hit, and now I'm kind of pressing because I know I need more here. I have hyperpigmentation. I'm gonna kind of hit that inside corner because I have not done my under eyes yet. Oh, I forgot. I'm gonna use Demi over here. So I'm gonna kind of hit this hyperpigmentation lightly here, and I'm gonna leave my under eyes open, okay? Now I'm gonna go around my brows since I already did my brows. Okay, then once I have that everywhere, I'm gonna look and see, is there any darker points in my face that I might need extra coverage on? I got a couple blemishes up here. I'm gonna press on a little bit more. Okay, so buffing motion, press on where you need a little bit more coverage. Okay, can you see the difference? It's not pulling me too dark or warm because I was very strategic with placement, okay? That is the blend brush. I'm not done with it. I'll show you how I use the other end. This is the more detailed end, and it's dense, meaning you can really buff on product or press on more on those small spots, like say hyperpigmentation, that kind of stuff where you need more coverage. Okay, I'll show you how to use the large end in a minute. Let's go over to this side and I'm going to show you my favorite brush for using this if you need a color corrector across your whole face. So a lot of people might not realize that their entire face is darker than their neck. Okay, what that means is if you're using Seint's makeup, if you are trying to match your neck and you apply a color that say matches your neck, but your face is darker, it's not gonna last, okay? And it's gonna give very little coverage. So with Seint's makeup, you have to use a color that matches the darkest points or it wears off, doesn't give good coverage. You're gonna have to load up and use a lot more product. And you're gonna come back to me and say, I feel cakey, it feels sticky, I feel tacky, and it's kind of rubbing off on clothes. And those are all signs that you're applying too much of a shade too light, okay? So in my opinion, the easiest way to mitigate that is just use a color corrector. It solves all of your issues. So for me, my very favorite brush for mature skin and beginners to using a color corrector, and especially if you need a color corrector all over, which a lot of people do, I'll be honest, more oftentimes than not, actually. I choose the blush bronzer brush, okay? It used to be called the B squared blush bronzer. This blush end, yes, it was originally designed for blushes, but something about this dome end can buff on, yet is soft and dense, but is just soft enough. It's like an airbrush, especially for mature skin, okay? So I am going to do more full coverage. If you come to me and you say you want full coverage, it is very rare that I'm ever gonna give you just 2 shades of just a shade all over and then a brightener, because the easiest way to get full coverage is using a color corrector by far, okay? So all you have to do is touch it, okay? And then we're gonna hit every point of our face. And this is the buffing motion, okay? Small circles so that we get the thinnest possible layer. Okay, now I have reactive skin, so everywhere I touch is gonna turn red for a minute, but so stick with me. All right, so then I'm gonna touch again. I'm gonna hit the chin. I'm trying to do half my chin. Okay, I'm gonna do it again. Again. And again, like you guys see how I don't even have the middle of this pan. I'm just kind of hitting this inner corner. I don't know if you can see that. And I touch it, I get a really small amount. Okay, so I'd say the only thing that this brush is not perfect for is small areas like around the nose and around the eyes. Then it can get a little bit more difficult to use this brush, but when you're not trying to do half your face, I promise it's easier. And I already did my brows, so I'm trying to avoid. And of course, my detailed brushes are both over on this side, which are my favorite for those small areas. Cheat and grab the detail anyway. Okay, so this small end will get around these smaller areas if need be. Like I need in that inner corner. Now, when it comes to under the eyes, I will be the first one to tell you it takes trial and error to learn what works for you. I have tried every possible brush, finger combination of learning how to apply these creams under the eyes, and it truly is a matter of learning how much you need for your under eyes and what method you prefer. And over the years, I've changed my preferences as I've practiced. Okay, so there's no right or wrong. It's just you want to keep it, like I said, as thin as possible. Then you can always go back and press on more where you're darker. Okay, or same thing for hyperpigmentation. Okay, so I have rosacea that goes across the entire mask of my face. I've got some hyperpigmentation through here, more rosacea here, broken capillaries, under eye circles. I've got it all, okay? I promise you, I've tried it all as well. Okay, so right now, can you tell the difference in coverage so far? So I did not do my under eye because we're gonna use Demi there, but this side I've got a really light hand. This side I've got, it's still buffed on in a pretty thin layer, but we're gonna kind of build this up. So you can kind of tell, can you tell I look darker than my neck on this side already? This side, not so much, because I kind of was really light-handed and just used it strategically. That is everything when it comes to color correction. Using the smallest amount possible for the look you want. So if you want natural coverage, choosing a brush that you can really buff on and just use it where you need to. And then if you're wanting more medium to full coverage, I'd recommend this brush. Nothing blends this out and buffs it on quite like the blush brush does. So a little bit of comparison, because I know I'm gonna get asked. The 3D brush. So I kind of mentioned this side. I'll be honest, I don't like this side for anything other than under eyes after years and years and years of trying it. And I will be honest, it's my least favorite brush, and I know it is the #1 selling brush, and I think that is because most people want to just be able to do your full face with one brush, and I totally get that. But I have more clients I've had to troubleshoot application with because of this brush than any other brush. So can it do a full face? Absolutely. Can all these others? Yeah, if you know how to use them correctly. So it was designed for, one brush all over, but I don't recommend this for highlight. It tends to streak. People tend to pull it. It doesn't buff on at all. It's kind of a weird shape. So you have to learn how to press, which is weird with this point. It's just not the easiest brush to use. Now, if you are OG, you've been using this makeup a long time, some people love this brush. I would say it is really easy to do a full face with this brush once you learn how much product to pick up, how to actually get coverage easily with our makeup, and you've been using it a while and you know how to use this brush. It can take a little bit of trial and error. Okay, so in comparison, this end is similar, but a little bit different than the blush end. Okay, so it's more dense and it's more flat this way. I would say I know a lot of, it's just not quite that same, whoops, wrong end, the same kind of dome, but it's similar. I do find that when people are using both, they pick up less product with this brush, and this brush picks up more, and it's harder for them to blend out. Okay, so I would say this brush would be even more full coverage than this brush because you're naturally going to be applying a heavier hand, even if you don't mean to. So let's go to the main shade. So I always fully color correct because I have hyperpigmentation, redness. When I contour, I don't want that pulling red or pulling out my hyperpigmentation. So I color correct everywhere. It's just how I apply my makeup in order for me to get the best look to my skin. I've shown videos of the difference of all day wear, of what it does to me and why I apply that way. And it's very clear to me why I do in order to get the best longevity and the best finish after a long day, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and do my main shade. So my main shade is just a little bit lighter and more neutral. So that way it will kind of tone down the warmth of my corrector, keep me matching my neck, but it also will build up coverage slightly, okay? So I don't just apply it in certain areas because I'm wanting to kind of build up coverage even when I want a natural look, because I swear by our Perfector sponge for any look with this makeup, I don't actually recommend ever layering a shade like I show how without it. Okay, so for me, in order for me to get a skin-like look, I have to use this method, and that's the main reason why. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the blend brush. Now this brush was originally designed for powder illuminators, which is why this is so loose. Okay, I will be honest, it took me a long time to fall in love with this brush. It took me a lot of experimenting because, again, this is a brush that tends to lend to this motion, right? This sweeping motion like we use for powder illuminator. Because it was designed for powders, it has that really loose fibers. It's not densely packed. You can't really blend really well. It's not dense enough to blend. And our creams are just, they take a little bit of pressure to blend. So that's why you got to have a kind of designed for cream, dense brush if you're going to be buffing on any of our creams. So for the longest time, I'm like, I don't know how to use this brush. I kind of discovered that this end is very similar to the small end of the detail. I feel like anything you can use this end for, you can pretty much use this end. They're a little bit different shaped, but they're both nice and dense, and they're interchangeable in my opinion. But this end, besides powders, I could not figure out how to really use it because it didn't blend contour, can't apply contour with it. I didn't want to use it for powder. And so once I figured out that you just can't sweep it, it was like a game changer. It is now one of my very favorite. The detail is still my favorite, but on the daily, these are the brushes I use. Now I still always use the blush and bronzer, but for a natural finish, when I'm having a good skin day and I want my skin to show, this is the method I use. So now I'm going to my main shade and I'm going to go into the large end and I'm going to tap. Now this brush, if you don't sweep it, it will pick up very little product when you're just gently tapping into it, okay? And it kind of largely gets distributed over this big fluffy part. So that way, when you go in and gently tap it onto the skin, you are getting very little product, okay? So what I do is I kind of just tap in and I kind of tap on and I just kind of move around until I can visually see that it's being toned down, okay? Now, I am not going to see a load of product on my face, okay? Because it's just, I'm trying to keep it as natural as I can. But can you see that? You can probably see it in comparison to my nose. Okay, so it is just barely toning it down and barely building up coverage so that when I go to that perfector step, it's just kind of pressing it into my skin and really just picking up the very little excess I might need picked up. Now, my nose is a different story. It's hard for me to hit all of these little areas with this large end, so I tend to flip it back over and then I press on with the more detailed end. Okay, so if you like the blend brush but you feel like you can't get very good coverage on certain areas, just use this end on those more precise areas. Okay, whether you have a blemish or a spot of hyperpigmentation or whatever it is, just kind of press it on with this end and you're gonna get a really beautiful natural look from it. Can you see the difference in coverage? This is color corrector and main. Okay, so 2 brushes, depending on your preference. We already buffed in light layer of our color corrector. You can, if you want medium coverage, I'd say stick with the same brush. Stick with the blush brush and just do this method and use this end, okay? You're just gonna tap in and then you're gonna tap on. Okay, now you don't want to buff this layer, it would mix the two creams, which will actually give you a different color, less coverage, okay? You're not gonna tone down the warmth. You're not gonna get as much coverage because you just place that color corrector where you needed it to match the darkest tone. Suddenly you're lightening the entire foundation, okay? You gotta make sure you are pressing so that you're not moving that, okay? And you can build up. I would say you can get medium to full coverage just with this brush, depending on how much you're picking up, okay? And you can just slowly kind of build up until you're happy. I'd say the number one brush for full coverage would be the buff brush, okay? So this is the most dense brush we have, okay? One end is just a smaller version of the other. Now, I would say in comparison, it takes longer to apply with this brush because of the size and because you're gonna have more product deposited in one spot. Because every time you're gonna touch that, it's gonna just kind of deposit it right there on your face, and then you're gonna have to work to kind of blend that out. And since we already have a color corrector on, you don't wanna blend like this. You don't wanna blend like this. You have to blend by tapping, okay? Now, this is another brush that lends to swiping. And again, another brush that beginners especially tend to come to me, or those that have been matched to someone and they were given this brush as their recommendation, and they come back and they don't understand why the creams are streaking on their face. And it's because you're applying with a brush that will streak. Don't do this motion. Don't swipe in and get too much product. This brush will get way too much product, okay? So again, we're just gonna gently tap. Do you see how much that picked up? I barely touched it, okay? So the highlights don't take a lot of pressure. It takes a gentle tap. When we get to contours, that's a different story, all right? So for this brush, I can usually see exactly where I touch my face, okay? Because it will deposit it right where I touch it. So it takes a little bit more time to really tap it out. You can probably tell how much coverage that gave already. But if you want full coverage, this brush will give it to you. Okay, so now can you tell a difference? Okay, so this is buff brush versus, whoop, I put it over here, blend brush. Okay, and we're not even done. We haven't contoured or brightened. So this brush, all you have to do is really look and be like, okay, where do I need more coverage? And since you are constantly just pressing and tapping it on everywhere, it's just gonna slowly build more and more product. So with our line, it's very simple. When you want really natural, buffing motion, okay? Anytime you want more coverage, find a brush that will press on the product. Doesn't make you have to buff it, but press it. And I feel like almost all brushes can really press it on well, at least on one end, okay? This end does not buff at all. This can press. It's gonna press on barely anything, so this is very natural coverage. This you can buff on or press, okay? Both of these are pressing motions. Even though it's called the buff brush, I didn't name them. This buffing motion, I feel like is actually really awkward with this brush. And it picks up so much product. I don't recommend it for that first thin layer. It doesn't distribute the product like this does. It will give you so much of your color corrector that you're gonna come back to me and say, I look orange, okay? It's all because you're using too much product. This end will buff, okay, and press. This will not buff, but it will press. Obviously, I don't use the bronzer end really, but I'll show you how I apply bronzer, but I don't apply it for highlight. All right, so the next step in how I apply is always my contour. Okay, so I'm gonna show you the difference between my favorite contouring brush of all time and the one that most people start with, and why I feel like they're a little bit different. Okay, so detail. Okay, the detail brush has a very straight edge, right? People might apply with this end, but I find if you can just practice applying with the large end, it means you have one less step. When you apply it as a straight line or even your finger, you then have to work twice as hard to blend it out. When you're trying really hard to blend it out, 9 times out of 10, you over blend your contour, and then you come to me and say, I can't see my contour, okay? It's not a contour color issue. Your contour is plenty dark, if I matched you at least. And it's more of a blending application issue, okay? Our contours are really pigmented, but they blend out super easy. The problem is they are so dry in comparison to our highlights. You can't apply them in the same way, in my opinion. They just work differently, and they're designed to be drier so they stay put, okay? So know that. But I find the hardest thing is that people are, again, swiping in, and then they're getting these globs of contour in different places on their brush, and then they go to their face and they're doing this, and they're just getting this blob, and they're trying to blend it out, and they feel like it just makes them look dirty, or they have some darker spots than others. It can all be avoided, okay? So for me, the detail contour brush is by far the easiest way. You can kind of tell I always have a divot in mine because I always apply my contour in the exact same way. This is why my contour always looks consistent. It's always the same. And if you practice it this way, you become a pro in no time, okay? So hold your brush at an angle and just kind of tap, tap, tap. Now I'm tapping with more pressure than I ever did with the creams, okay? So that way I could get that color on half of my brush, and I feel like I've got a hole in it because of where, okay? So I can get that color on half of my brush only. So that way when I touch my face, the top part of my brush that doesn't have color will start doing the blending for me, okay? So when it comes to contour, we're gonna go under that cheekbone. Anywhere you touch your face is gonna deposit the most amount, right? So you always wanna touch it up here, not here in front of your face. You're gonna get a big glob right there that then you're gonna have to work to blend out. So again, I just color corrected. My entire method of application is so that I'm not moving the coverage I already placed. I want to get the best blend from my contour, and the only way for me to do that personally is to apply my highlights and even out my skin tone, so that way this doesn't emphasize my redness and my hyperpigmentation, okay? So if you have similar issues, try this, all right? So we're gonna kind of cut that cheekbone, and we're gonna slowly just kind of act like we're tapping until we get about in line of the corner of the eye. Not very far, okay? Right up along that cheekbone. And I'm just gonna start tapping back and forth and let the brush do everything for me, okay? Once I feel like it's been kind of evenly distributed along that line, okay, you can see it's kind of already starting to blur out. Now I'm gonna start tapping upwards, so that I am blending that line up, never down, okay? If we try to blend it down, it's just gonna drag our contour down. That just will make your face look less lifted. The whole point of contour is to lift, right? So we're just gonna tap upwards so that we blur that line. And if you have to, you can kind of flick if you have one part that's not really blending, but I never want you to blend like this, okay? I know you're gonna come back to me and say my contour is not showing up. I promise it's dark enough. I can wear almost every color of our contour. It's dark enough. You just might have to apply more if you're using a shade maybe too light for your skin tone. But if you're using a shade way too dark, to be honest, it's just gonna be harder for you to blend, okay? So as long as you're applying this way, I promise you're gonna get it. Okay, now I'm less strategic about my forehead. I'm just gonna get some on the brush. Let's see if I can do half. Okay, I'm just gonna apply it kind of along my hairline. Now we always wanna go up into the hairline so we don't have that white mark along our scalp. And then we wanna go down into the highlight, okay? Whereas a sharpened cheek contour is okay, across the forehead never is okay. It looks like you haven't blended your contour, okay? So just blend it into that highlight. It blends so easily. We just kind of want to frame the face. Same thing with the jawline. We start back here at the back of the ear where it's gonna be the darkest. Go up under the jaw, okay? On the side of the face, you risk seeing that stripe. Okay, there are more advanced techniques for disguising jowls, that kind of stuff. We're not gonna go into that today. I've got videos on those as well, but we're just gonna do regular 3, okay? Along the hairline, under the cheekbone, and along the jawline under there to carve that out, okay? Now I'm gonna show you the same thing, but this time we're gonna use the 3D brush, okay? Now, if you compare these two, okay, these are both the contour ends. You can tell this brush, way differently shaped, okay? You're not gonna get as a chiseled contour, a more defined contour with a brush like this, okay? So the way I do it is exactly the same, but you'll notice it'll look different. Now, I do feel like this brush blends out better if you are blending like weird spots or trying to blend in different ways. This brush is really dense and it blends really well. This brush, like we were saying before, like some of these brushes are better for pressing or buffing. This brush is actually really good for buffing. I used to apply my color corrector with this brush because it will really buff on a thin layer. So if you don't have an additional brush, you can use this, okay? So say I needed to do a full face of my color corrector and not just specific areas, I could have picked up this brush and buffed it in small circles everywhere, okay? So this one does that really well. It just doesn't press on really well, in my opinion, in order to kind of get the full coverage look like I did with this brush. Try this same way. I'm gonna go at an angle because this brush is kind of wide. So I'm gonna kind of try to concentrate it. Now, do you see how it just picks up the color very differently? Okay, it's just not as precise, okay? It's not a detailed brush, but let's see if I can get a very similar look, okay? So we're gonna kind of cup that cheekbone. Okay, and you can probably tell it just does a lot wider of a stripe. Okay, and I'm gonna try to apply exactly the same and just start blending and pressing upwards. Now I feel like, can you tell that this side picked up more product? This brush is much denser than this one. Okay, so it is gonna pick up more contour, which is perfect for the full coverage side, right? Okay, so then you can go in and you can blur any lines if needed. I feel like okay, difference in both sides. Now let's do forehead. Ooh, man, it does pick up a lot more. To be careful. Okay, one thing I really do love this brush. This is a really great blush end as well. Again, because it's similar to the blush brush. Okay, We have highlighted and contoured. Now it's time for accent brightener. Actually, I lied. We forgot to nose contour, and I want to show you guys nose contour with the smudge brush. So let me get back out my contour real quick. Okay, the smudge brush. This is the old style. They look identical besides the fact that this is shiny. We've got a more flat end and then this more domed end. We're going to use the flat end. We're going to use that straight line and we're going to tap it into our contour and we're going to use that for our nose stripes. Okay. Okay, so 2 parallel lines. I find this brush really easy to kind of like hop over my bumps in my nose. I don't know why, but it just is. Then you can put residual under your lip if you want. And then I like to flip it over and use that dome end and kind of use the very tip. It's not really pointed, but a little bit. And then use that right down the middle. I can tell I kind of got a little crooked, but that's okay. Okay, so smudge brush for the nose contour. It allows you a really quick, easy, detailed, I'd say I use this when I really want to make sure I get my nose contoured nicely. It works really well. All right, I'm glad I forgot that step because I was about to brighten with this, but I forgot I am using Demi under this eye. Okay, let's quickly go over some Demi brushes. There are 5 Demi brushes. Okay, I would say 2 of them are designed for the face, the shape brush and the wash brush. I can honestly say when I was doing Demi as a full face, I never used the wash brush. Probably because we were taught with Demi to never wash Demi, never sweep it over a large area. Now, if you are doing toning with Demi Colour and say you got some of those colors before they're discontinued and you do like Demi for a full face, you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about toning, this could be a good brush. Now, let me pick up my clean blend brush. These 2 are very similar, okay? The blend brush is a little bit more dense, fluffier. Can you see that? This one's a little bit more flimsy, but they are very similar. Now, the other ends are not. So the wash brush has a very more pointed, like I feel like this is just a smaller version of the blend brush or this end. So I can honestly say I don't think I ever used it. And then the blend brush has a more flattened kind of rounded end than this taper, okay? But I would say these would be the most similar. So if you want to try the large end of the blend brush, I don't feel like this would, you're not going to be able to buff on or really tap on like you can with this end of the blend. With this end is too flimsy. Do you see that? Okay. Now this end, I do feel like it's probably going to pick up less product than this one does. I can just tell from the way it feels. It's going to pick up less and it's thinner, so it's not going to put down as much either. But it's an option. Or some people used to really like, I mean, this would be good for powder illuminator if you have it. Even this small end, I would say, would be really good for powder illuminator. In fact, I might have to use that for powder illuminator. That would be a really good one. Or if you like the blend brush for blush, this would work for blush as well. Now, I don't like to sweep my blush on, which you'll see, and so I don't use this end for blush, but some people really like that. So that one is the wash brush. Now, the shape brush I do like, and when I used to do a full face with Demi, and show how to sculpt and use their blush, I would always use this. This small end would be really good for like specific areas if I had to use more than one color of sculpt, or I would use this end because this one is more dense. So I do like this end of the shape brush, and I do like this brush for blush. So it's a nice rounded, it reminds me of just a blush, but it actually does kind of press on really well or buff on. So I can be honest, I've never used this for highlight, but I could see it working really well. And this end is very similar to this end of the wash. I would say, if you can tell the difference, very minute. This one's a little bit taller, a little bit more pointed. I'd say that this still isn't very dense. So when it comes to under eyes and Demi, or dark spots and Demi, there's only 2 brushes I ever recommended, and I feel like there's only 2 brushes you need. And that was the blur and spot brush, okay? Mine's kind of bent. I had multiples over here. The blur brush and the spot brush. Now, if we want to compare the spot and the multitasker is shorter and more dense, and the spot brush is longer, has more of a tip. I would say the spot brush picks up less product, which in Demi world is important because it can be hard to pick up very little. Like you guys heard me harp about how very little 3D. Well, Demi, if you see the color when you're applying it, you've picked up way too much color. Like it almost should look like you're wiping it off, not putting it on. If you're seeing the color, it's too much. It is very different. It's more like a stain, not actual color going onto the skin. It's hard to describe until you see the magic. So if you have any points on your face, any dark spots, any blemishes, anything that is small, you have to use the spot brush. It's the only one that's pointed enough, in my opinion. And just from other artists talking about they did not have the spot and they were trying to learn Demi with the multitasker, it was harder for them because it was picking up too much product. It's just not nearly as pointed either, okay? So when it comes to Demi, I feel like the size of the brush does make a difference. You want to use the closest brush to the size of the area, and you don't want to pick up too much. So that's why it's important that these were looser. They're not as dense because you use even less of the creams. So if you have any blemishes, dark spots under eyes, the spot brush I'd say is the #1 brush you're gonna need. The other brush is blur, and this one I only use under my eyes. So when I have dark spots or blemishes, I tend to use only the spot brush, and I just change colors as I move to different spots. This one is the only one I feel like will really apply a really light wash of a color to an area that it's not too heavy. So I always recommend the blur brush around the eyes. Sorry, did I say blur or bright? Did I say blur or bright? I meant bright. This is the bright brush. This is the blur brush, okay? Now the blur brush to me is very similar to, it's like a smaller version of the smudge brush or a larger version of the eyeshadow brush, okay? This brush I used to always use for nose contouring with Demi, because if you don't know, nose contouring with Demi is a little bit different. You still have to touch color to color, and I have a lot of spots on my nose, so I used to have to kind of really strategically place them. And then this is amazing for nose contour, or if you ever were using Demi around your eyes, this worked really well as well. Now this is usually what the rule is: if any spot is larger than a sesame seed, it's more than one color. This is definitely larger than a sesame seed, so you can't really ever use this in an area that you're filtering. It's too big, so you're touching more than one. You're touching an area that's definitely more than one color. So that's why it's always, you go smaller and smaller with the brushes in Demi. But I'd say the closest Demi brush for this end would be the spot brush and the multitasker. It's gonna be the difference between eyeshadow brush Blur brush and Smudge brush. You can see how similar those three are. They are just as dense, okay? Now, if you flip it, this is the closest to an eyeshadow brush. So I totally think this brush can be used for eyeshadow. I mean, those are so similar. I'm trying to think if there's, I feel like it might be a little less dense, which I feel like if you're using it as a blending brush, it's okay. They're very, very similar, okay? So I'd say if you want another eyeshadow brush, these are discounted right now, try the Blur brush. This one is just gonna have a little bit of a wider tip, but I feel like this end would probably be easier for outer corner. So it's kind of like a mix between the eyeshadow brush and Smudge brush. So this is a really good option for eyeshadow. Now comparing the Bright and the Spot brush, both have very similar ends. They're a little different. For some reason, this Bright brush has a little bit wider of an end. And then if you're looking at the eyeshadow brush, so they're more pointed. Can you see that? They're not flat to where it's gonna really blend out. They're more pointed. So they're gonna be better, I'd say, for a wash of color if you're gonna use them as eyeshadow, not so much blending out the crease as well. But I would say that you could probably even use the Spot brush for liner, because it's got such a nice, this is a pretty nice dense end. And the Bright brush would be good for even the lower lash line, because it's a nice taper to really strategically place under the lower lash line. So if you have been using the eyeshadow brush and you feel like it's too wide and you need help blending it out, I would say this brush would work really well for that, because it's a little bit more pointed, a little bit more detailed. Okay, so that's the Demi brushes, real quick. Now, I'm not gonna use 3D under my eye on this side. I'm going to use the Spot and the Bright brush, and I'm just gonna do my under eye on this side using Demi Colour. Now, when it comes to Demi, I'll be honest, I use 4 colors under my eyes. I don't feel like most people can just pick one color. It might not look like I have a lot going on, but I promise you I do. And learning Demi, you'll notice there's very subtle differences between. Now, I've got spots of hyperpigmentation. I've got blue and purple and green. And so I do need usually about 4 different Demi colors and different points around my eyes just to filter them out. Once you learn what colors you need, then application gets really much faster and easier, but there is a learning curve, of course. So I'm gonna use my Demi palette, try to show you as I go. Biggest problem with Demi on camera is that you can never see the colors like I can see them, and I always have to kind of look in a mirror really closely, or I can't see either what I'm doing. So we always start with the darkest points. Excess blue creates depth, so that's going to be 03. Once you hit the darkest points, for me personally at least, I got to go down 1 level to 01 and hit the next darkest points. Again, it's almost like you're wiping off the color, not applying it with Demi Colour. And you also kind of have to like move your head around a lot more in order to kind of see it at every angle, because again, it shows differently depending on where you're looking. Okay, and I feel like I don't have as much today, probably because I already did my eyeshadow and it covered up a lot of my purple. So then I'm just gonna switch to the bright brush and use just a touch of YO to get rid of some of this purple blue. Okay, so I really didn't need to cover too much hyperpigmentation, so I didn't even use any pinks. But there you go. There was a little bit of Demi to show you guys what the most natural look would be. For me personally would be to use Demi under the eyes so that I got no texture, no creasing, any of that kind of jazz. The full coverage side, I want to kind of show you two brushes, I'd say, for the most full coverage under the eyes. Now I already have my color corrector and my main shade. I'd say the most full coverage are going to be these two. So the buff, like I applied my highlight with, I would then switch to the small end to press it on, or that 3D brush. So either one, I'm going to go to my lighter shade and I'm going to kind of just tap it, okay? Now I'm going to go all the way up to that contour line. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I would just kind of tap that on right there. And then tap over like so. Same thing with this. Tap. I know this brush is really, makes you want to swipe it, but again, I do like the size of this. The pointedness gets really in along. You can probably tell how much product that picks up. It gets in really well in that inner corner, but it picks up a lot. Can you tell? Okay, so there you go. Brightened, which we didn't really brighten over here because Demi, you don't really need an accent brightener in my opinion. And we're at the most important step of all, which is the perfector. So over here, I'm feeling real makeup-y, real heavy. Over here, I think looks great, but if I was going to use all 3D and not Demi, I would have picked either of these two brushes that I used, either small end, and I would just kind of tap on that brightener a little bit, like I can show you a little bit, because I didn't put Demi on the side of my nose. Just a touch to kind of brighten that area. And then you can just brighten right here if you have mature eyes and don't want to apply 3D near your lash line. You can still kind of get that brightened look with 3D and Demi, that hybrid method. Okay, so my perfector is now pretty dry because I've been talking so long, but I'm still going to press it all over. Okay, you don't need it under this eye since you just used Demi. But to blur out that nose contour. Anywhere you're prone to creasing, and especially on this full coverage side, okay? Now, this is the only way I can keep this looking like skin over here is with my perfector. I still perfect no matter how light-handed my brush was or anything. I'm still going to. Now, under this eye, I'm gonna need to really concentrate so that it doesn't look heavy and cakey. And so that when I set it, it doesn't look cakey. The number one reason for your makeup looking cakey is having too light a shade, using a too light a shade without matching the darkest points first. I'd say I can only use this brightener shade, which is way lighter than my natural skin tone, because I matched the darkest points. I color corrected, then I put my main shade, then it will sit okay. Otherwise, those shades too light are only gonna look like texture on your skin. Now, if you have too many creams and you don't use your perfector and then you put too much powder down, that is what leads to it looking cakey. Now I can go ahead and I'm gonna tap out this side because I need to set it because I'm using 3 creams under my eyes. My eyes never stop moving or blinking. And so I have mature eyes. They will crease over time. I'm gonna just use the powder brush. Now this is the only brush I ever touch to powder. If you mix creams and powders, you're gonna have to wash your brushes a lot more often. I would say if there's a favorite brush you like to use for powder and for cream, I'd recommend getting 2 because otherwise they can get really cakey. They can cause a film over your powder if you're touching a brush to your powder that you had previously touched with a cream. You're gonna get this hard film and then you're not gonna get any powder to come off with it. So I'm just gonna touch it and I'm gonna go right up all the way to that lash line. And then anywhere else I wanna kind of take away a little shine or prevent creasing. Now this side I use Demi, but can you see how it still kind of looks a little textured because of the glow under my eyes. Now, if you like that, it looks very youthful. If you have a lot of texture, when you have glow, that's a dewy finish or pores, texture, wrinkles, anything like that, and you're wanting it to not be emphasized, your #1 best bet is to powder that area. What it does is it takes away some of that reflection, which reflection is what causes the look of texture on the skin. Okay, so anywhere you want less texture, like say I have pores right there, say I want, now you do not need to set Demi, but can you tell how I just took a little bit of that sheen away and suddenly my under eyes look smoother, okay? So for me, it's a reflection thing. I like most of my face to be very glowy, but I don't want my under eyes because under eyes are where I have the most texture. So I use the powder brush. That's the only thing I use this brush for. You honestly can use this brush for a lot of different things. It does buff well. I'd say it wouldn't be the most full coverage. It's gonna be similar to probably like buffing on the detail brush. But I'd say most people use this brush for blush and then they can just press on their blush with this end and then this would be their powder. Real quickly, I'm gonna just do a little bit of bronzer and blush and we're almost done. So I'd say the only brush I recommend for bronzer is our bronzer brush because our bronzer tends to be a more sheer bronzer, but I find that some people, when they're trying to use a different brush other than this, they tell me it's going on patchy or too dark. And I'm like, our Bella is so sheer. Unless you are going in with a dense brush, it should never be going on patchy because all you have to do is gently swirl your brush and you're gonna be getting a really light hand of that product. Now, I will be honest, Bella is super creamy when you first get it, so you need to be really light-handed with it until it dries out a little, and it will, as it's in your compact, dry out a little over time. So now I tend to always have 2 bronzers, which is Bella and Heat Wave, and then I put Glow Illuminator, which is our dark shimmery one, and I swirl into all 3. And that is always what I use for bronzer. Now, do you see how I have very little across the entire amount of my brush? Otherwise, if you have too much in one spot, then yes, when you touch your face, it's gonna go in one glob and then you're gonna have to blend it out, which again, we just put all of that color corrector exactly where we want it. We don't wanna have to move product around. So I'm just gonna hit the high points of my face. Now you'll see on my cheeks where I did color correct more, I just gently tap it. I'm barely even touching my face. And can you see the difference? Okay. So I'm telling you, it's all in application and all in how you use the brush. Okay. I know a lot of people really like to blend with this brush, But again, it depends on your application method. Like I don't, because I just applied very strategically. And I only press on my colors after that first layer of my color corrector. Everything else is pressed on, okay? So if you are using my method of application and you aren't getting the coverage you want, how are you using the brushes after that very first step? Okay? Do a little blush. I'm gonna use the same color on both sides. I've been actually dying to try this combination. So we just got the new Shade of the Month Wallflower. And I was just thinking, do you know how pretty that would be over, there it is, Madrid. I just have a feeling that these two will look really good together. So I'm going to use the blush end. I'm gonna tap into Madrid, go to the outside apple of my cheek. And again, I'm just tapping, okay? That way I get the exact amount I want, exactly where I want it, from contour, blush, and then we can put illuminator. Okay, I'm not moving any of that color I just placed. I don't have to work on blending. It just kind of blurs itself if you are just tapping right to the center. Okay, now I'm gonna top it with the new Wallflower for some glow. I feel like this is such a pretty color on its own, but I wanted to try it with Madrid for a little bit more pigment. Oh yeah, it's a good combo. Doesn't really change the color. It just kind of adds a little bit of more glow to the face, which is my favorite. All right, both those are going in my palette. Last but not least, I'm gonna use that Multitasker for my lips. It is always the brush I pick up for my lips. So I'm gonna use the new Suede lip liner in the large end. I'm gonna align, and then I'm gonna try that same combo on my lips. Okay, if you want a lot of pigmentation, use the brush. If you want just a little, use your fingers. So I sometimes use my fingers to put a really thin base, and then say I want a lot more of the topper shade. Then I'm gonna pick it up with that brush. Last week I wanted to put Sunshine State over it. I haven't stopped thinking about it, so I did. Madrid, Wallflower, Sunshine State. That is a killer combo. Okay, friends, there you have it. I think I went over all of them. Tried to compare 3D with Demi. Tried to show you my favorite ways to use every brush. I'd say as long as you remember, no swiping on the face. Really buffing and pressing, tapping it on will be your best friend, especially if you have mature skin like me. There are so many multiple ways of using these brushes. I mean, I can't even begin to talk about all of them, but I'd say there are definitely some better methods than others that I've discovered through years of trial and error and troubleshooting with clients that work for everyone as a whole and that are better suited for the type of coverage you're wanting. So if you have any questions over what you're looking to get from a brush or the coverage or your makeup or whatever it might be, of course, drop it in the comments below or reach out to me at sarah@thecontourchemist.com. I'd be more than happy to help troubleshoot with you. So hopefully you can tell the difference in coverage, and we'll be able to see it in the after pictures. If you're wanting to snag one of those Brush Blitz combos, whatever you want to call them, collections, there you go, that's the word. One of the collections, they will end at midnight Mountain Standard Time on the 25th of August. There are not very many sales on brushes. I feel like there's only been a couple in the past 5 years. So definitely snag. I will drop in a quick graphic of all the different combos and the savings of each one so you can see what is available. Always, if you're needing a color match, my color match request is in the drop box below the video. Just fill that out. Let me know how you like to wear your makeup, and I can make sure I can give you the right shades, the right brush combination for the look you want. I hope this was helpful, friends. As always, thank you so much for watching and being here, and I will see you next week. Love you.